In 2006, a prototype of a software project called Twitter, twttr, was developed by Jack Dorsey and Florian Weber. That name used because the full twitter.com domain, the word with all its vowels, was already owned and in use, and because the vowel-less version of the word had only 5 letters, which aligned with SMS shortcodes for the US, which were basically shorthand versions of telephone numbers that were used in lieu of such numbers by mobile network operators at the time. Going without vowels was also super trendy in Silicon Valley back then, due to the flourishing of online success stories like Flickr. Twitter, in that early incarnation, was meant to be a one-to-many SMS service, which means sending text messages from one phone to multiple phones, rather than one-to-one, which was the default. This early prototype was used internally at Odeo, which was an early 2000s web-based media directory, founded by some of the same people who eventually founded Twitter as a company. And, random fun fact, Kevin Systrom, who eventually co-founded Instagram, was an intern at Odeo one summer back in 2005, before the company was sold in 2007. Twitter was spun out as its own company the same year Odeo was sold, and by 2009, it had become the hot new thing in the burgeoning world of the web. Folks were sending tens of thousands of tweets, messages that were shared one-to-many, online on the web instead of via SMS, by the end of 2007, and that was up to 50 million tweets a day by early 2010. The whole concept of Twitter then, from its name, which was initially predicated on SMS shortcodes, to its famous 140-character limit, was based on earlier technology, that of text messages, which originally were limited to 140 characters. And that sort of limitation, which has in the years since been messed with a bit, the company slowly adding more capabilities, including the sharing of images and videos and other media types. But those limitations have, in part, helped define this platform from its peers. As while Facebook expanded and expanded and expanded to gobble up all of its general-purpose social networking competitors, Instagram dominated the photo posting space, and YouTube has locked down the long-form video world for more than a decade. Twitter held its own as a less sprawling, less successful by most metrics, but arguably more influential network because it was a place that was optimized for concision and up-to-the-minute conversation, as opposed to every other possible thing it could be. This meant that while it did not have the same billion-plus user base, it didn't have the ever-growing ad revenue that Meta's platforms could claim, it was almost always the more culturally relevant network. Its users sharing more up-to-date information, its communities generating more memes, which were then spread to other networks days or weeks later, and it became a hotbed of debate and exclusive information posted by journalists and politicians and business owners. A lot changed when Tesla and SpaceX owner Elon Musk bought the network in October of 2022. Changing the name to X in mid-2023 and pivoting the company dramatically in basically every way, removing a lot of those earlier limitations, cutting the number of employees by something like 80%, and losing a lot of advertisers because of his many ideological statements and political stances, including his backing of former president and now president-elect Donald Trump in the 2024 election. What I'd like to talk about today are the Twitter clones that have popped up in recent years, and one in particular that, despite its still small size and arguable underdog status, is being heralded as the possible real-deal successor of Twitter in that original, influential, and scrappy sense. And what makes this network, Bluesky, different from other would-be successors in this space. You're listening to Let's Know Things. I'm Colin Wright. I'm able to keep this show ad-free because of support from listeners like you. If you're finding value in what I'm doing here, consider becoming a paid supporter for the cost of a cup of coffee each month at letsknowthings.com. And as a thank you for your helping me keep this show solvent, you'll receive an additional bonus More Things episode each month. All right, let's get back to the show. The leadership at X, including owner Musk, recently promoted a new feature on the app that refocuses attention away from buttons like likes and shares in favor of views, a metric of engagement that some analysts have claimed is meant to conceal the fact that the network is seeing a lot less actual human engagement and because it feeds people posts it wants them to see. This change allows them to artificially inflate the seeming activity on these posts for advertising purposes. They can say, hey, look how much attention these posts are getting, please buy some ads, and that allows them to charge a higher price than if they were using those more conventional engagement metrics, which are apparently collapsing. As a company, X has been hemorrhaging money since Musk took over. Its ad revenue, which makes up the majority of its income, dropping by nearly half from 2022 to 2023, and it lost another 24% from the first half of 2023 to the first half of 2024. One estimate released in November of 2024 suggests that X may have missed out on nearly $6 billion in lost ad revenue since Musk took over in 2022, mostly because of all the decisions he's made, including basically going to war with many of the company's top advertisers, publicly criticizing and threatening them for not paying more and buying more ads, but also his many foot-and-mouth statements and, at times, his seeming support of extremist causes and characters. He's attempted to bring some of those advertisers back, with mixed success, as the ones that have returned after boycotts have usually invested far less than in the past. And most of the ad buyers that have filled the gaps are paying a lot less per ad unit than before, and are generally of a lower quality. A lot of cheaply produced products from low-grade Chinese factories, a lot of scams of various sorts, and/or products sold by companies that are politically conservative culture warriors aimed at the network's increasingly right-leaning and far-right audience. A bit like what we've seen on Fox News over the past decade or so, following waves of sexual assault and other scandals on that network, which led to similar advertiser exoduses. It's also been estimated that the network lost a substantial portion of its total user base following Musk's takeover, including something like a third of all users in the UK and around a fifth in the United States, all just in 2024, up till the month of September. That loss of revenue and users was enough to cause Fidelity, which owns a multi-million-dollar stake in X, to write down the value of its investment by more than 75%. In July of 2024, it estimated the company, which was purchased for about $44 billion by Musk, was only worth about $9.4 billion, a substantial loss for them and their investment, but also for all the other shareholders in the company. All of which leads up to what happened in the wake of the US's most recent presidential election, during which Musk shelled out more than $100 million to support Trump's campaign, while also pulling out all the stops to promote the former president on X, something that many users were not too keen on, as the owners of other social networks have been criticized and threatened in the past for showing any hint of political bias in their business decisions or in their personal life, and this was incredibly overt in comparison. This heavy-handed biasing of the network toward Trump and that very public support of the candidate by X's owner sparked a new exodus from the platform. Some people simply quitting social media entirely, at least for a while, but others looking for something of the same, and thus checking out the Twitter clones that have popped up over the past handful of years, the majority of which only actually gained real momentum in the wake of Musk's takeover and rebranding of the network a few years ago. One of those Twitter alternatives, Mastodon, attracted a lot of early attention because of what it offered that Twitter and other mainstream social networks did not: an open source platform based on the ActivityPub protocol, which means it can connect to other ActivityPub capable social networks. So in theory at least, you can have a profile on a Mastodon instance, which is a self-hosted Mastodon network, a social platform island of sorts that is connected to other such islands, the totality of the social network made up of a huge number of such instances, all lashed together and interconnected in various ways, and each offering different rules and focuses. And you can have that profile on that island of Mastodon function on other networks beyond Mastodon as well. And that's interesting because it means your work, your posts, your conversations are all more portable, allowing you to move to different networks if you choose, without losing all of your history and connections and activity and credibility, because it's all compatible with all of those other networks. So it's almost like having a Facebook profile that you can also use on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube if all of those networks played well together and shared information and post types between themselves. That's the promise of a protocol like ActivityPub and a network like Mastodon. Mastodon was made public in 2016 as a non-profit. It has basically the same feature set as pre-Musk Twitter, and while it had already gained a steady stream of users from previous upsets at networks like Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr, among other more mainstream social platforms, it attained a huge number of new users in 2022 on the news that Musk would be taking over Twitter, hitting around 2.5 million monthly active users by the end of that year. That number has since dropped to just under 1 million as of September 2024, suggesting that the initial wave of enthusiasm has crested, though the platform continues to see a lot of support within some online communities, and its interactivity with other networks, including Meta's Threads, which has also added ActivityPub functionality, means that its numbers will always be a little bit weird, as folks can read Mastodon content and interact with Mastodon users from other connected networks. Speaking of which, Threads is a Twitter clone that was released by Facebook and Instagram parent company Meta in July of 2023, and it attained more than 100 million users in just 5 days, which set a new record for the rate of user attainment. It took a little while for the network to be released beyond the US, especially in the European Union, due to regulatory concerns, and an earlier version of the app was more of a Snapchat clone, but that one did badly enough with users that the company pulled it from app stores and reused the brand for this new app a few years after that failed experiment. Threads was able to achieve that high adoption rate in part because it promoted the app, which is basically a Twitter clone, heavily on Instagram and Facebook, but it was also partly because of Musk's takeover of and changes to Twitter. Folks looking for a Twitter alternative, but who didn't want to deal with the comparable complexity of something like Mastodon, flooded into this new network, and Meta's decision to push politics and other serious discussions to the algorithmic back burner made it a friendly space for brands and influencers who didn't want to be associated with the chaotic forces that were swirling around the newly rebranded X, and to a certain degree in the world at large. So Threads is similar to Twitter, but it supports ActivityPub like Mastodon and has similar community guidelines to other Meta products, which means there's a lot less nudity and fewer references to illegal things allowed, things like drugs. It was recently announced that Threads had surpassed 275 million monthly active users, which puts it within spitting distance of independent assessments of X's monthly active user figure, which Musk recently said was around 600 million, but Sensor Tower says is closer to 318 million as of October 2024. There's been some hubbub about the possibility that Threads might be seeing losses in activity on the network, though, including a drop in how much time users spend on it each day. This is potentially the result of that decision to keep controversial stuff more or less hidden and to heavy-handedly, compared to other networks at least, curate the feeds of users who have very limited power over what they see in their feed. The company announced they would be adjusting the algorithm significantly in the near future in order to allow more breaking news and other such posts to rise to the forefront, and it's thought that this might be a response to the recent success of another Twitter clone called Bluesky. Bluesky was founded in 2021, and it was originally, back in 2019, an initiative by Twitter to see if decentralizing their network might be possible, making Twitter just one network in a fediverse of networks, basically. As a result, it's perched atop an open communication protocol that it developed called the AT protocol, which is distinct from, but similar in utility to, ActivityPub, in that it allows social platforms to link up and interact with each other, despite being different social networks. Bluesky is superficially similar to pre-Musk Twitter, but one of its killer apps, one of the things that distinguishes it from most other options in this space right now, alongside the AT protocol, is the ability to choose your own algorithm. So that rather than having Meta decide what you see in your feed, and rather than just seeing a chronological list of posts from people you follow, you can also choose to follow curated lists of people, to tweak the word and content filters that you use, to adjust the way posts are arranged, and an abundance of other options. It's pretty versatile, and you can easily flip between different filters that you make yourself or that other people have made for you to peruse different sorts of content, filtered and displayed in different ways. The network launched on an invite-only basis in 2023 and was fully opened to the public in February of 2024, at which point it had already attracted more than 3 million users. Shortly after that launch, Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter and Bluesky, left Bluesky's board, saying that the company was making all the mistakes that Twitter made, and that he was stepping aside to focus on another decentralized social network that he founded, Nostr, instead. Bluesky continued to gain users, though, relatively slowly most of the time, though whenever Musk did something controversial, they would typically see a larger influx, as was the case for all the other Twitter clones. In October of 2024, several changes to Twitter, including one that basically rendered its block feature useless, and another that said the company could use all posted content for AI training purposes, led to a surge in Bluesky adoption, bringing in more than 1.2 million users in just 2 days. That paled in comparison to what happened in November following the election, though, when Bluesky started to grow by about 1 million users a day, catapulting its user base to more than 20 million people as of November 20th, a surge that rocketed the app to the top of app charts. And for context, the company only has about 20 employees as of late November, so that's a huge employee-to-user ratio. Bluesky is not without controversy, as the company's leadership has already been criticized for taking investment money from blockchain capital, which could change its incentives. And though it's approaching 25 million users as of the day I'm recording this, up from a small fraction of that just a month ago, that is less than 10% of what Threads and X have. And that growth is almost certain to slow sometime soon once the post-election flight from X has subsided. So it's possible this surge could be similar to what Mastodon saw not too long ago, a big surge in users followed by an ebb in activity as people stop using the network for various reasons. The company has also been experiencing growing pains in terms of tech because of that sudden, much larger scale, but also in terms of culture. All those newbies joining the network all at once are changing the platform's makeup, accidentally trampling Bluesky's traditions and folkways, while also changing the conversational mores and topics and trends from how they were pre-user flood, again, about a month ago. Bluesky is currently the one to beat in terms of growth rate, in other words, and it seems to have achieved significant cultural resonance following the election, especially for people on the left of the political spectrum who no longer feel welcome or comfortable on X. But both Mastodon and Threads have represented the same and been lauded as the one to beat in recent years. And in both cases, their growth was also largely the consequence of X's failure, not necessarily the result of their own accolades and advantages. It's possible what we're seeing here, then, is not a struggle to become the next Twitter, but rather the emergence of a fractured, text-based social media ecosystem, each platform offering something the others don't, or favoring some groups and their needs over those of the others, and that in turn leading to a more fractured communication ecosystem, and maybe reinforced filter bubbles as well. The book I'd like to recommend today is called Invisible Rulers: The People Who Turn Lies into Reality by Renee DiResta. This book is very topical at the moment, speaking of those reinforced filter bubbles that we might see as a consequence of a fractured text-based social media landscape. This book focuses on the people who create the various realities that folks of various ideological and political biases, in some cases, have built from the ground up in their minds as a consequence of the sort of stuff that they see online and the sort of stuff they hear about from friends and people they trust online and in real life. It's written by somebody who has been researching and writing about the folks in the misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation spaces for a long time. And this book is a very good overview of the sorts of tactics and approaches used to influence people and conversations in this way, but also the sorts of characters that you tend to see, which provides a nice template in both cases for watching out for those sorts of characters when you're talking to other people and looking at their beliefs, but also in our own cases when we are trying to decide who is providing us a clear-eyed, fact-based view of the world and who is just telling us more of these sorts of things we want to hear. Now, if any of that sounds interesting to you, consider picking up a copy of Invisible Rulers by Renee DiResta. Let's Know Things is a listener-supported show. I don't make any money from ads, only what listeners contribute by becoming paid supporters at letsknowthings.com. If you're not in the position to become a paid supporter at the moment, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your pods. Those help get the show in front of more people and lend a hint of credibility to independently made shows like this one. A huge thanks in advance, whatever shape your support might take.